You're listening to the Rise Above podcast, the only podcast on the planet with a mission to help you live a free and uncommon life. Here's your host, Greg Smith.
Welcome. Thank you again so much for being here. If this is your first time, welcome to the Rise Above podcast. And if this is not your first time, thanks again for joining me. This is the Rise Above podcast, and you are listening to episode number 7. I'm your host, Greg Smith. And I believe if you desire uncommon freedom in business and in life, it starts with creating a champion's mindset from within. So today I want to share with you a very powerful concept that I've learned the hard way. And this concept can be so powerful depending on who you are, but it applies to everybody. But this concept can be used for good and it can be used for bad. And so what you do with the information that I share with you today is up to you. But my hope is that you use it for good and you use it to change your world and to change the world. And it really starts with me being in 6th grade on a bus coming home from a retreat with my classmates. Now, I went to a private school, and that school had 2 elementaries that went from kindergarten to 5th grade. And so in 6th grade, you would all come together to one school. All right. And so the kids that I went to school with from kindergarten to 5th grade were some of my best friends, and some were cousins. And, a lot of us were really just family. We went to church together and we went to school together. We walked to school together. We lived in the same neighborhoods. We played street ball and roller hockey and all these things. I mean, we're all friends. All of our parents, really knew each other really, really well. Small knit community. And what happened was when the schools merged in 6th grade, you had families coming over to our school because we stayed within our school. So we had this other school that merged with ours. And a lot of the kids knew each other, as did the parents. And so these kids already had relationships with each other. And I really didn't. I just was not in that circle, that sphere. And it was really kind of a wealthier sphere. It was more of the affluent families. And so, through merging, I found myself on the outs because these kids knew each other. And coming home from this retreat, all of a sudden, literally out of nowhere, there was one kid who decided he wanted to be a ringleader and start making fun of me. And all of my friends at that point, except for one, turned on me in that bus on the way home. And it literally made my life from 6th, 7th, 8th, part of 9th grade very unpleasant, to say the least. And, my buddy Ronnie, who was my best friend then, I am forever grateful because he stood up for me on that bus. But I won't get into details on what I was made fun of for and all those different things, but it changed my DNA of who I am as a person. And looking back, as weird as it is, I think it really prepped me for who I am today and what I'm doing today. And I want to share with you some concepts that I learned because through that process of, not now all of a sudden not fitting in, not finding friends, etc., you find yourself, one, skipping school, afraid to show up in large crowds, afraid you're going to walk down the hallway and see somebody that doesn't like you or they're going to make fun of you. And you find yourself not being your true, authentic self. And even today, now I am free. I am free. I am my true, authentic self through and through. But I believe because I've been working with people and organizations, and I've been helping people work through their head trash for over a decade, I believe and know that many people are still not living their true authentic self. And it's because of these different fears. And what I'm going to share with you today is really how to overcome those and how to get along and create relationships with anybody. And I think that's a skill, and I think it's a talent that can be harnessed and developed. And I have developed that. And so through those years of being a misfit, I literally started hanging out with all kinds of people, literally all kinds of people. I started to fit into any group of people that I could. And I hate coining any group of people, but the really smart kids, the nerds, I fit in with those. The kids that were eclectic, I fit in with those. And I started just to find these small pockets of people that I would fit into. And it was really because I was forced into finding any group that was going to be willing to accept me and hang out with me, because nobody wants to be the kid that's by himself at school. And so you start to try to find, where do I fit and where do I belong? And so through that, I learned some very valuable skills that apply to business, and they apply to being a parent, they apply to your workplace, and really just life in general. I have one of my really great friends literally has told me that he's envious because he says, you're like a chameleon. You're like a chameleon. He's like, you have so many different friends and so many different social circles, and you just get along with such a wide array of people. And I believe that I am very blessed and very favored in the relationship category. And you've heard me talk about in prior episodes that I am very relationship centric. I desire deep and loving relationships, and my friends mean the world to me, because at the end of the day, when you die, that's the only thing that really mattered was the lives that you impacted, your families, your friends, and the butterfly effect to people who you may never even know that you affected. And if you were to strip away your house, your cars, your job, you take all those things away, what are you left with? You're left with relationships. Now, you could take that a step further. You take your family away, you take everything away, like poor Job in the Bible. What are you left with? If you're a believer, you're left with your relationship with God. But if you're not a believer, you're left with your own mind. And that's it. Now, fortunately, not too many people are left with just that. You're left with some form of relationships. And so learning how to be a chameleon and be all things to all people, I think, is a skill that can be used for many things, especially if you're in the field of leading people. It's very important to learn how can you fit in with many different groups. And so, believe it or not, the Bible has stories that can be learned from, and it has value. And one of those, I believe, is in a book written by the Apostle Paul called Corinthians. And so in Corinthians, Paul's talking because his job, he was a leader. He was an organizer. He was a salesman. He was selling people on Christianity. He was selling people on Christ. And so this is the power of what you have here. Paul literally spells out how he was able to win the hearts and minds of people. And he says in these verses, he says, I have voluntarily become a servant to any and all. So he serves people. And that's what I do. That's what you should do. We should all be servants, right? And he says, I become a servant to any and all in order to reach a wide range of people that are religious, people that are non-religious. And I'm reading the Message if you are a believer and you are going to pick apart my words here, but it's not about that. It's about the message here. He says a wide range of people, religious, non-religious, meticulous moralist, loose living immoralist, the defeated, the demoralized, whoever. He goes, I didn't take on their way of life. He kept his bearings in Christ. So he says, I did not take on their way of life. I kept my bearings, but I entered into their world and I tried to experience things, here's the key, from their point of view. I've become just about every sort of servant there is in my attempts to lead those I meet into a God-saved life. So what he's saying is he kept his bearings. So you keep your morals, you keep your character. This isn't about tricking people. This isn't about anything unethical. What it is he says specifically, I try to see things from their point of view, and he entered into their world.
Are you someone who wants to live life on your own terms? Do you dream of having more time to spend doing the things you love? Then download your copy of The Freedom Formula absolutely free at www.riseabovepodcast.com. What are you waiting for? Go to www.riseabovepodcast.com to get your free copy of The Freedom Formula.
So key number one is my friend Ron saw things on the bus from my point of view because he was sitting in my seat with me. He saw what it was like to have the kids turn around. He saw what it was like to be made fun of. He was put in a predicament because those were his friends too. And he had to choose, was he going to stick with Greg or stick with the crowd? And fortunately, I am forever grateful that he was his true authentic self, and he stuck up for me, which actually gained him respect with that group. And he was able to be a chameleon and still be my best friend through those years and get along with those folks too. But he saw it from my point of view because he was in it. And it's because he got into my world. Now, he didn't get into my world voluntarily in that specific manner, but what we can do as leaders and as people is we can start to try to see things from other people's point of views. And I think that's key number one. I remember very specifically, and if you're wondering, in ninth grade, I learned how to wrestle and I got confidence and I ended up standing up for myself finally. And, one of a few of the people that made fun of me, we all became great friends again. And so there you go, kids are kids. But it was dark times, but anyways, some people wonder, kind of how that panned out. But I remember a time to see things. This is the point, see things from other people's point of view. I remember a time when this was 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, I was having great success in my business. And there was somebody else who was a little newer, and he was also having good success, but not as much success as me. And so, my ego was a little puffed up at the time. And we both had the same mentor. And I was at this event, and I had this expectation that this gentleman should come up to me and shake my hand. And I remember talking to my mentor after, and I said, "Oh, so-and-so." I'm like, "Yeah, he's kind of arrogant, like a lot of pride there." And my mentor's like, "Well, why do you say that?" And I said, "Well, the guy didn't even shake my hand." And he says, "Well, did you shake his?" And I was like, "No." He goes, "So how do you think you look to him?" And I was like, "Oh man." It's like, you got to be kidding me. Like, turn the tables, pot calling the kettle black. But I realized, because what happened was I had somebody out there who helped me see it from the other side, the other point of view. And so now, the next time I saw him, and now we're great friends. I was just at his house last week. And the next time I see him, I introduce myself and I shake his hand. And I learned very, very vividly right then that you should always be the first. You should always be the first to introduce yourself to other people. Like, make it a point to be the person who goes up and introduces yourself to other people. All right. So when you can see things from other people's point of view, we all love it when people come up to us and introduce themselves to us and make us feel welcome inside of an environment. And so let's do that for other people. The other thing that we must do is we must understand that the sweetest sound to anybody is their own name. And so I've made it a point, and I encourage you to do the same, to become excellent at learning people's names. And the way that I do that is I make sure that I'm the first person to introduce. I shake their hand and I say, "Hey, is this like today? I just left jiu-jitsu." Same thing. I'm like, "Hey, my name's Greg Smith. Is this your first time here?" The guy's like, "Yeah, actually, this is my second." I'm like, "That's awesome. What's your name?" And I'm still shaking his hand, and he tells me. I say, "That's great, Mike. Well, I am so excited that you're here." So I repeat his name back. He says something else. I'm like, so Mike, where are you from?" I say his name again. He tells me. And then I say it one more time. I'm like, "Well, you know what, Mike? It was great to meet you. I hope to see you keep coming back. Have a good night." And so within my short little intro, I'm going to say somebody's name 3 times. And so, Now think about that from his point of view. You're the nice guy or gal that is introducing yourself and making them feel warm and welcome. That makes sense. So these concepts of being everything to everybody. Now, this doesn't mean that you change who you are or your morals or you do things that are not true and authentic to you, but you have to be able to truly get along with all people if you are looking to lead people. And one of the best ways you can do that is by always seeing things from their point of view, And so, you like in my profession with leading, I have to be able to get along with literally every person. And I've learned the other way that, a little off topic here, off script, is the other way I don't have fears. I just understand that all people are people. We are all people. And so I don't really pay attention to what your title is, how much money you make. I don't pay attention to any of that. I pay attention to how can I treat you and how do you treat me? That's it. Do you stick to your word? That's something I'll base some decisions on here. But I always pay attention to just how can I treat this person no matter who they are. And I don't get nervous depending on, what they are, because I don't put any man on a pedestal. I've met many celebrities, NFL players, singers, etc., through what I've been able to do over the last decade. And you learn that everybody bleeds the same. We're all the same. We all have the same inner desires, and we all have the same inner fears as well. And when you can learn that, you get to know it because you see it from their point of view because it's your point of view. So to kind of wrap up, I want to encourage you to start making sure that as you're meeting new people, you're seeing it from their point of view too. It's kind of like, if you're ever in a conference or maybe you're at church and they're like, okay, everybody, let's do a little meet and greet. And it's like, oh boy, I don't really ever want to do that. But I make it a point to be excellent at it because I want to give people a good experience, and seeing it through their lens, I know that they really don't want to do it too. But if I can break down the walls by introducing myself to them and, asking them questions about themselves, I actually employed that technique and it was one of my bullet points, but I forgot it. But if you go back to my conversation with Mike tonight about jiu-jitsu, I asked him about him. I asked him, is this his first time? Where is he from? And so I'm putting everything on him because what do people like to talk about? Typically, themselves. And so I want to give somebody the opportunity to do that. But it's also because I want to get to know them on an individual level as well. And it's because it's not fake, it's genuine. So if you want to be your true, authentic self and you want to help lots and lots of people, then you have to learn how to be like the Apostle Paul and how to morph and how to be a chameleon. And the thing is, when it all comes down to it, there's simple things, there's basic things that you can do no matter the person, the title, their background, ethnicity, anything. And that's always trying to see it from their point of view, always introducing yourself to them and shaking their hand, learning their name and saying their name, and then asking them questions and getting to know them by asking those questions. And that's how you can start to truly lead an army, and that's how you can truly start to connect with more and more people and really start to develop deep relationships with other people. So I hope that was helpful today. It's kind of going off the cuff, but I really wanted to talk about relationships and being like the Apostle Paul. So if you got value from today or any of my podcasts and you have not done it yet, I would really appreciate a rating or a review. Better yet, a review. I mean, you can always hit a 5-star, don't mind that. But what I love is when somebody drops a nugget, and we've had great feedback so far of what they got out of the show. So with that, until next time, take care. God bless.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.